Well, it is official, Gravy Bones did indeed win Pro Tour Singapore.
Gets these attacks sideways, pass back for Enki. This now just a formality. As within the walls of the Lion City, a roar could be heard. The fans, the crowd getting behind Shiroi Wu, the Singaporean taking glory in Singapore.
Congratulations to Shiroi Wu for picking up the win on Gravy Bones. Had to go through a grueling top 8 to do so, including a mirror match or two, and ended up pulling it out in the end. But the question that I think a lot of people are asking at this point is this hero too powerful, and does this hero need some sort of nerf? And I will just go ahead and stake my claim and say it. The answer is no. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush this time around. Gravy Bones in no way, shape, or form, in my opinion, should be touched by a banned and restricted announcement. Now, of course, we can talk about what they could and maybe would do if they feel a ban is necessary, but I don't. I don't think it's that necessary, and there's a couple of reasons why. Now, before I tell you my reasons why, I think it's important to understand what people are really calling for, and the number one card that I see people actually asking to be removed from the format is Golden Tipple. Now, I think we can all agree, at least anybody who's either played the deck or watched it played on one of these fantastic streams that LSS has put out lately, everyone can agree that Golden Tipple is a driver of this deck. It really makes the deck function, it makes the deck go. And so a lot of people are calling for Golden Tipple to either be removed completely, or I think the more tepid approach is to remove just the blues. And this cuts the synergy off at the stump because it keeps a blue from going into the graveyard without extra work, and it also doesn't generate that gold. And yeah, I could see that being something that they would want to do and something that they could do. If anything, that would probably be the only like median point that they could go to without absolutely axing the deck. And I don't think that they can axe the deck, but more on that later. Now, the other issue with just pulling the blue tipples out is I don't think it does enough to really affect what the deck does. Gravy Bones can just slot 3 blues in that place, and yes, he loses out on a couple of targets for creating gold and a couple of cycle targets in that respect, but it can just be played around. Like, you can do different lines on those turns and avoid playing Tipple if it were in your deck or in your hand. The same thing can be said if the card is just not in your deck, at least the blue specifically. Now, if they decide to take all Tipples out, and I don't think they should do this, but if for some reason they said Gravy Bones is too good right now, let's go ahead and restrict or just completely ban Golden Tipple, I think that really does kill the deck to some degree. Gravy Bones does very much rely on having even just a couple of gold so that he can have some way to get that ally out. When you don't have your discard effect, when you don't have a gold to pop, you're just stuck with allies and you die to allies in your hand. And you don't have a way to create any real gold pile outside of limited in this format. If you don't have Tipple, you can't really create gold. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if you look at Puffin and if you look at Marlin, neither of them care about gold as much as Gravy Bones does. And the reason is gold is a little bit more ancillary. Of course, for Puffin, I think it is more important, but for Marlin, it just gets her an attack action card. And when you're building a constructed deck, you have a bunch of those. With Puffin, you're using gold as essentially a golden cog generator. And the interesting thing about that is there are cards in her deck and in the constructed format that already make you golden cogs. So it's baked into cards in the deck itself. So gold is sort of a secondary way of doing that. You could almost say the same thing for Gravy Bones. Almost. Except he doesn't really have a hero effect if you don't have gold. He doesn't really have an easy way and a consistent way to get rid of those cards in hand if he doesn't have access to Golden Tipple. So he would take this huge transformational leap. The deck would really have to change almost completely. You might have to run way less allies. You don't really have a lot of like other powerful cards you can splash in, or you just have to forego like blues completely, and it just kind of nukes the deck. So I don't want that to be nuked, and I don't think LSS also wants the deck to be nuked, and here's the reason why. I think it's a huge benefit that LSS has a hero that is both thematically interesting, that draws new players in. People see that hero and they go, I need to know more about that hero, and that is powerful and accessible via an armory deck. I think all of those things combine to make a hero that LSS should continue to prop up and make sure they don't really kill. Because if you kill that deck, then the excitement that is created from the armory deck really falls off. Now, we know this to be the case, and we know that like armory decks for lackluster heroes and that continue to be lackluster, I mean, those heroes don't really spike in popularity. I'm talking, I hate to say it, about the Max Nitros of the world, right? And the Boltons of the world. Those heroes exist in Flesh and Blood. I know you probably forgot it, but yeah, those heroes do exist somewhere. Unfortunately, they don't exist in Classic Constructed at top tables of events. And you know what does? Gravy Bones. And you know why that's good? Because more people want to play Gravy Bones. Now, there's a whole litany of, other little issues that you have to deal with. The deck is expensive, and how do I get cards, that sort of stuff. But the simple fact is that if people want to play this hero and the hero is skill rewarding, I think this is a net positive for LSS. Point 2, I think the data says that the meta itself doesn't need to be touched. And I know it's so easy to see the result of a Pro Tour and see Gravy Bones do really well and win and go, that's the problem right there. Or have the PTSD of the Dromai, or really the Enigma, because that's the one we all have PTSD of. But have the PTSD of that hero and say, we need to get rid of this quick before it becomes a problem. But look right here. Arachne slipped through the cracks, and this is the CC portion of the Pro Tour Singapore. This is the data from this past weekend, right? The CC portion, these are the heroes that have an overall winning win rate, and I've sorted it by the win rate. And as you can see, the heroes I mentioned, positive win rate, there you go. The heroes that I mentioned, including Fang and Puffin if you want to, but there were only 6 matches of Puffin played and only 30 matches of Fang played. Nevertheless, the rest of these heroes have a pretty decent amount. And we have Verdance, we have Arachne, we have Kano, and we have Gravy Bones in the top 4, followed by a small number of games played by Arachne Marionette, a decent number played by Dio, and then a lot of games played from Syndra. And here's what I want to point out. I'm going to unsort it. I want to point this out. The numbers show that the matchup between Arachne slipped through the cracks and Gravy Bones is now solidly 50%. Interestingly enough, I think this recorded some data differently because the matchup, when you look at it from the Arachne slipped through the cracks side, is a perfect split. It's 50-50, 33 wins, 33 losses. When you look at it from Gravy Bones sides, it says they lost one more game. It's 32-34. I think one of these is clearly wrong. If it turns out to be slightly Arachne favored, so be it. If it turns out to be exactly dead even, so be it. But here's the interesting part. I think the reason that Gravy Bones was as successful at this tournament as he was is that, one, very, very skilled players were playing him, and they had clearly specifically tested this matchup, the Syndra matchup, which the Syndra matchup into Gravy Bones is a 68%er. Even after all that testing, we saw several of those players on that team, the Armory, pick up wins on stream versus Syndra, and that's a really cool thing. But the tail of the tape on the data side is that the matchup is still solidly Syndra favored. So why did Gravy Bones do so well? Well, take a look at the matchup data from Syndra into Arachne slipped through the cracks. 37% win rate. The presence of Arachne slipped through the cracks totally crushes the Syndras, and because Arachne was so prevalent, it was the most represented deck, Syndra couldn't do her thing to eat the gravies. That's the point. And if this is a coin flip matchup, you just have to be a skilled player in that matchup. You have a chance. Now, the other interesting thing is the Dio matchup for Gravy Bones is also positive. Now, there weren't that many Dio players there. Nevertheless, it's a positive matchup for Dio. But Arachne slipped through the cracks also eats that. And so it forces those two aggro decks that do well into Gravy Bones off of the sort of path that would lead them to Gravy Bones. Winning leads you to more Gravy Bones because they are going to start slowly rising to the top because Gravy Bones performed rather well. 53.6% of a win rate across all matches. So Gravy Bones are sitting at those mid to top tables. If you want to find them as a Syndra, you have to win. And what can't you win against? Arachne Slip Through the Cracks, which is the most represented deck. So that is the tale of the tape and the reason that it looked the way that it looked. But there's even more to say. It's not even just that Arachne Slip Through the Cracks forced these decks out, because Gravy Bones wasn't the dominant deck on the weekend, even though it won, and it had holes in the matchup. Because if we look at the calling at Singapore, Gravy Bones' win rate falls to less than half. Now, barely, of course, it's like 49.9%. It was one game off of being exactly even, a 50% win rate. But look at some of the other decks here in this ballpark that are doing better. And funnily enough, if you sort it, Bravo Showstopper had the best win rate across 13 matches. Yeah, come on, we're not going to sort it. Arachne Slip Through the Cracks still up there. Syndra still towards the top. Victor, not a good matchup to play on the Victor side into Gravy Bones. That would be terrible. But a markedly better Dash.io representation. And here's the interesting part. Ira Scarlet Revenger did not have a winning win rate, but won the calling. Shoma picked up the win versus Michael Fung. It was a Gravy versus Ira matchup, and I just have to say how beautiful it was to see the two of them take a picture after not having a very good go of it on day one of the Pro Tour, and then take the same picture when they were sitting at the finals table of the calling. I thought that was hilarious. And Ira ended up picking up the win in that matchup. Ira, who just got an Armory deck, Ira, who's very easy to pick up and start learning because of that Armory deck, Ira has a positive win rate into Gravy Bones. That's another hero that has a solid win rate into Gravy Bones. Now the problem, again, is Arachne Slip Through the Cracks. So I guess I can concede this point. Here's the problem. If anything needs to be touched, it probably should come towards Arachne Slip Through the Cracks, because Arachne is single-handedly holding down at least 3 aggro decks currently. And those aggro decks would very much help balance Gravy Bones out. And that's the biggest point. Looking at all the data and all the metrics based on how these games played out, the top players are, a good number of them are playing Gravy Bones and showing how skill expressive that deck can be and how you can climb out of these insane holes. In fact, watch tomorrow's video. I'll show you exactly how that happened, because Gravy Bones is a powerful deck. But if Gravy Bones was reintroduced to some of these bad matchups, thanks to Arachne Slip Through the Cracks stepping down, our problem of Gravy Bones is another board state hero, Gravy Bones is ruling the roost, that problem would probably go away. Am I off base here? Am I just way out in left field? Am I reading this wrong? Look, I know I have gravy colored glasses on. I get it. He's back there and he's the man. But tell me if I'm off base, and do you think they should ban Golden Tipple? If not, what else would they touch? Because I don't think it exists. And if you like this talking head editorial style video where I give you my opinion on the state of Flesh and Blood, make the number go to the other number. And as always, thanks for watching.